It was supposed to be just another fun night. Horror movies, laughter, and the usual late-night ride home. Tallulah had never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. To her, the things in horror movies stayed on the screen. But that night, something changed. As she pedaled through the quiet streets, the world around her seemed different. Quieter. Heavier. Like the darkness itself was pressing in. She turned down the familiar shortcut, the one that led past the old cemetery with the ancient church at its center. It had never unsettled her before, but now, under the weight of the night, it felt wrong. The church doors, massive and weathered with age, stood wide open, yawning like the mouth of something waiting to devour. And then she heard them. Whispers. They drifted through the air, soft at first, curling like smoke from the abyss. They weren't the hum of the wind or the creak of old wood. They were voices. Dozens of them, maybe more, murmuring just beyond the threshold. Each step toward the entrance made them louder, until the hushed tones twisted into something sharper, urgent, almost pleading. Her pulse pounded as she hesitated at the doorway. And then, a silence. The voices stopped, as if they had never been there. She stepped inside, swallowed by the church's vast, shadowy interior. The air was thick, heavy, like something unseen was watching, waiting. The wooden pews stretched into the darkness, the altar barely visible in the dim glow of moonlight filtering through stained glass. Then, suddenly, movement. A flicker in the corner of her vision, a shifting of shadows where there should be none. A cold breath of air curled against her skin. She ran. The moment her feet hit the pavement, the whispers returned. Louder, angry, following her into the night. The church doors slammed shut behind her with a deafening finality, as if whatever was inside had just missed its chance. She didn't stop pedaling until she reached home, breathless and shaking. Her parents brushed it off, just her imagination, they said. But deep down, she knew better. And even now, long after that night when the world is still and the darkness creeps in, she swears she can still hear them, whispering, calling her back. It was supposed to be just a thrill, a late-night drive to a so-called satanic church, buried deep in the heart of Indiana's rural darkness. 5 friends, restless and reckless, piled into a small Chevy Beretta, their laughter masking the unease clawing at the edges of their bravado. The road stretched endlessly into the abyss, a single-lane gravel path flanked by whispering cornstalks that swayed like silent watchers in the night. The deeper they drove, the quieter the world became, as if even nature itself refused to acknowledge what lay ahead. When the church finally came into view, it stood like a forgotten relic, its wooden frame warped with time, its broken stained glass windows barely clinging to their fragile existence. The cemetery beside it yawned into the darkness, a maze of crooked headstones and tangled weeds, stretching beyond what their headlights could reveal. Then, movement. A spectral figure, barely more than a swirling wisp of bluish-gray mist, took form in one of the lower windows. It had no true face, no distinct features, yet an overwhelming sense of awareness radiated from it. 5 sets of wide eyes locked onto the apparition, their breath catching as the air around them thickened, heavy with something unseen yet undeniably present. The graveyard, once lifeless and still, seemed to stir, shadows creeping between the stones like whispering phantoms. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet they remained frozen, transfixed in a moment stretched impossibly thin between reality and nightmare. And then, light. Blinding floodlights, stark and merciless, erased the darkness in an instant. A truck had appeared out of nowhere, its massive frame blocking the road, its presence as sudden as it was unnatural. The doors creaked open and a man stepped out. His uniform bore the markings of a county sheriff, but something about him was wrong. His movements too calculated, his demeanor too practiced, his shadow stretching unnaturally long beneath the artificial glare. He spoke, but his voice held no warmth, no authority, only the unsettling weight of something deeply, disturbingly off. As he called in their IDs, the tension twisted tighter. He used a cell phone, not a police radio. His truck bore no official markings, just harsh floodlights designed to blind and intimidate. The pieces fell into place like shards of broken glass. This was no real officer, and they were utterly alone on a desolate road, trapped between the haunted unknown and a man whose intentions were anything but law-abiding. And yet, through it all, the presence in the church window remained, watching, waiting. And in the stillness, it almost felt as if it was laughing. The basement had never been a place of fear. It was modern, partially above ground, and a regular hangout spot for the family. But as night fell, an eerie stillness settled over it. Shadows stretched longer in the storm shelter. The pantry door loomed darker, and an unseen presence seemed to seep into the walls. It started with T. He came home late, stepping through the sliding glass door into the dimly lit space. As he made his way to the bedroom, a faint rustling sound came from the pantry, subtle, almost deliberate, like a hands shifting through boxes. He ignored it, assuming one of his brothers was searching for a late-night snack. But when he reached the bedroom, he found all of them already inside, accounted for. A creeping realization set in. Who, or what, had been inside the pantry? The following night, Q stepped into the hallway for a quick trip to the bathroom. The house was quiet, the air thick with an odd, oppressive weight. As he turned his head, he froze. At the end of the hall, just beyond the exercise equipment, something moved. A figure. Long black hair, a white shirt, black shorts. He blinked, his breath catching in his throat as the shadowy form slipped silently into the storm shelter. But no one in the house matched that description. The next few days only deepened the mystery. G heard loud crashes in the storage room, the kind that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. When he investigated, he found the door to the hot water heater room wide open, despite the fact that it was always kept shut. That small confined space was just large enough for someone, or something, to hide in. Then, one evening, G and L sat upstairs, watching a movie, when a familiar voice drifted up from the basement. It was T, speaking casually in the living room below. Confused, they went downstairs to check. The basement was empty. Silent. T wasn't home. He was at work, miles away. The cold weight of dread settled over them. These weren't just random disturbances. Something was in the house, and whatever it was, it wanted to be noticed. The narrator's voice must be deep, deliberate, and haunting, carrying an unsettling weight in every word, as if they are recounting events that should never be spoken aloud. Each sentence must feel measured, as though the narrator is carefully selecting which details to reveal, aware that some truths are too disturbing to share all at once. The tone should start with an eerie calm, a quiet confidence that draws the audience into the world of the unknown, as if they are hearing a ghost story whispered by someone who has seen these horrors firsthand. As the tension builds, the voice should slow, stretching certain syllables ever so slightly, letting silence linger after key phrases, making the listener feel the emptiness creeping in. When describing normal moments, routine activities, everyday settings, the delivery should be subtly detached, as though the narrator is lulling the audience into a false sense of security. But as the horror unfurls, the voice must take on a chilling, almost hypnotic quality, dropping lower, speaking just above a whisper, forcing the listener to lean in. There should be an ever-present feeling that the narrator knows more, that they have seen what lurks in the darkness, and that their calmness is not reassurance, but resignation. The final lines of each scene should hold a weighted pause, words trailing off like the last flickers of a candle in a pitch-black room. It must feel as though the story is unraveling, not just for the audience but for the narrator themselves, as if they are revisiting something they've tried desperately to forget. This isn't just storytelling. This is confession, spoken by someone who understands that some nightmares do not fade with the morning light, and the way they speak, the way their voice carries the dread, should make it clear. What is being told is not fiction. It is warning. Her name was Diamond. At least, that's what was written on paper. But to her, that name felt like it belonged to another life, one that had been stolen away, twisted by fear, shaped by nightmares that never seemed to end. Now, she was Opal, a name she had given herself, a fragile shield against the horror that had followed her for years. Some nightmares fade with time. Others take root, growing deeper, stronger, until they consume everything. And her nightmare had a name. Jason. He was never supposed to be part of her life. A transfer student, someone cast out from another school meant for those who couldn't fit into normal society. But Jason was different. He wasn't just troubled, he was something else entirely. From the moment he arrived, there was something off about him. The way he moved, slow and deliberate, like a predator studying its prey. The way he spoke, his voice calm, too calm, as he casually whispered unspeakable horrors about what he wanted to do to her. And worst of all, the way he watched. Always watching. Even when he wasn't near, she could feel his presence, lurking just out of sight, waiting. At first, she thought she was imagining it. He was just another student, another shadow in the crowd. But then the fear started creeping into every part of her life. The moments she caught him staring, unmoving. His dark, sunken eyes locked onto her even when she looked away. The quiet threats muttered under his breath, not in anger, but with certainty, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. And then, the day that changed everything, when he told her older brother, without a hint of emotion, that he would tie up her boyfriend, kill her, and violate her lifeless body while he watched. That was the moment the nightmare became real. The moment the air in her lungs turned to ice and the walls of her world started to close in. That was the moment Jason became more than a name. He became a curse, one she couldn't escape, no matter how hard she tried. He followed her through the years, his presence never truly gone. He was outside her work, parked in a dirty truck for hours, watching. He was behind her on the street, his footsteps just a little too slow, just a little too steady. And then, when she thought she had finally left him behind, the tapping began. Night after night, soft at first, barely noticeable. But then it grew louder, more insistent, a rhythmic, unnatural sound against her window, 6.5 feet off the ground, too high for anyone to reach. And yet, something was there. Someone was there, trying to get in. She wanted to believe it was paranoia, that her mind was playing tricks on her. But when strangers at her new job started asking, "Are you Jason's girlfriend?" she realized the truth. He wasn't gone. He had never been gone. He knew where she lived. He had always known. And he was waiting, watching. Opal knew what she had to do. The police were useless, her locks were meaningless, and fear was a ghost that had long since become a part of her. There was only one choice left: to run, to erase the last traces of Diamond and become someone new. But even as she packed her bags, even as she prepared to leave everything behind, one question haunted her more than anything else. What if running wasn't enough? What if Jason didn't just want to watch anymore? What if, one night, the tapping on the window finally stopped because he had found another way inside? Some places are better left undisturbed. Places where time itself seems to stand still, holding on to the echoes of those who once walked among the living. In the heart of central Indiana, buried beneath the weight of countless whispered rumors, stood a place feared by locals and avoided by those who knew better. A so-called satanic church, long abandoned yet never truly empty. They said strange rituals once took place here, that shadows moved on their own among the crumbling pews and rotting wood, that those who dared to step beyond its threshold never left unchanged. But for those drawn by curiosity, by the insatiable need to know the truth, the warnings were never enough. That night, when the group of friends set out to explore the ruins, they thought the biggest threat would be their own imagination. They laughed in the car, passing around a flashlight, their voices full of nervous excitement. But as they turned onto that forgotten road, the world around them seemed to shift. The trees stood taller, their gnarled limbs stretching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. The headlights of their car barely pierced the growing mist, and an unnatural stillness settled over everything. There were no crickets, no rustling leaves, only silence, heavy and suffocating. The church came into view, its broken frame bathed in pale moonlight. Time had not been kind to it. Its steeple had collapsed, and the roof sagged inward, barely clinging to the remnants of its former glory. Yet, despite the decay, it felt aware, like something inside was watching, waiting. The friends hesitated, their bravado slipping for just a moment as they stared at the looming structure. Something felt wrong. A presence, unseen yet undeniable, pressed against them like a suffocating weight. And then, the first whisper came, so faint it could have been the wind. But it wasn't. It was something else. Something that knew they had arrived. What began as an innocent adventure would soon spiral into an unrelenting nightmare, because some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Some places hold echoes of the past, but what if something still listens? What if something still watches and waits? The first time it happened, it was just a whisper. A faint, almost imperceptible voice that drifted through the darkened room like a dying breath. He had dismissed it as a trick of the mind, a product of exhaustion. But as the nights passed, the whispers grew louder. One night, as he lay staring at the ceiling, he felt it. A presence. A weight pressing down on the air, thick and suffocating. Slowly, he turned his gaze toward the doorway. The door, which he was sure he had shut before bed, now stood slightly open, and beyond it, something waited. It watched him, always watching. He would wake to find the door ajar, the whispers now right beside his bed. His mirror, once a simple object of reflection, now became a window to something far more sinister. One night, he caught a glimpse of them. Two hollow, glowing eyes in the corner of his room, staring at him through the mirror's warped glass. Sleep became a luxury he could no longer afford. Every night the whispers grew louder, more insistent. His own name was spoken in tones that slid beneath his skin like ice. The thing in the mirror, it was waiting for him to break. The last message sent from his phone was chillingly simple. "It's in the room with me. Please help me." They found his room in shambles. The bed was empty. The closet door stood open, revealing only darkness. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the lingering echoes of whispers that never truly faded. And the mirror. The mirror reflected something that was no longer there. Some say he never left. That if you listen closely on a quiet night, you might still hear him whispering, waiting for someone to take his place. The room was still, too still. The only sound was the faint hum of the bedside lamp, its weak glow casting frail light against peeling vintage wallpaper. In the corner, an old wardrobe stood silently, its warped wooden frame carrying the weight of years long past. But something about it felt wrong. The air around it was heavier, charged with an unspoken presence. And then, the door, just barely ajar, revealing a sliver of impenetrable blackness beyond. The kind of darkness that seemed to swallow the world whole. A slow, agonizing creak echoed from within, like the weary sigh of something ancient, something waking. The girl stood motionless, her breath caught in her throat. A cold dread coiled around her spine, urging her to turn away, to leave. But something pulled her forward. Curiosity? Fear? Or was it something else entirely? With a shaky breath, she raised a trembling hand, her fingertips hovering just above the edge of the door. The wood was ice cold, sending a sharp chill up her arm, and then, without warning, the door shifted. Not from her touch. It moved on its own. A deep groan of wood against wood reverberated through the room. The gap widened. And then, the whispers began. Soft at first, like wind slipping through cracks, but layered. Multiple voices speaking in a chorus, an ancient tongue that sent a sickening pulse through the air. Her heart pounded violently against her ribs, her breath now shallow, uneven. She took an involuntary step back, her pulse hammering. But something moved inside. The darkness within stirred, shifting like a living thing, and then something reached out. A hand, long, thin, unnatural. The skin, impossibly pale, stretched tight over protruding bones. The fingers twitched, then curled as if testing the air. It moved with deliberate slowness, emerging inch by inch from the void. Her lungs clenched. Was she even breathing anymore? Panic clawed at her chest, but her body refused to move. The whispers grew louder, frenzied, as if whatever lay within was speaking directly to her. Then, the hand jerked forward, swift, predatory. She stumbled backward with a strangled gasp, her legs barely holding her upright. The wardrobe groaned again, but this time the door didn't just shift. It opened wider, revealing something deeper, something waiting. The darkness within the wardrobe was no longer just an absence of light. It was something more, something alive. And it wanted her.